The Varnak Empire didn't fear much. For over 200 years, they swept through galaxies like fire through dry leaves. Planet after planet fell, civilizations collapsed, and resistance crumbled like old stone under their weight. Their ships were massive, living fortresses bred for war. Their soldiers, genetically engineered, stood twice the size of humans and had no word for mercy in their guttural language. They had never heard of Earth, until they did. Humanity had just begun to stretch its fingers beyond the solar system. A few scattered colonies here and there, Mars, Europa, a mining outpost in Proxima Centauri. We weren't a threat. We were ants playing with rockets, but the Varnak had protocols. Eliminate before infestation, they called it. They didn't even send a fleet, just one war cruiser, the Runvak, and a small escort squad, enough to wipe out any new species and file a report. They were expecting another easy cleanse. Then came the Solace, not the biggest ship, not the most advanced. Hell, even back then it was running on half-patched software and an engine core older than some of its crew. But it had something the Varnak couldn't measure: Captain Elijah Rourke. They first encountered each other near the edge of the Gliesa system. The Varnak vessels dropped out of warp, their hulls black as void and bristling with weapons. The Solace was alone, stationed there for basic patrol duty, just eyes on the edge of human territory. Rourke didn't run. "Tell command we've got company," he said, calm as ever, lighting a cigarette in the command chair as red lights started flashing. "And prep everything we've got. We're holding this damn line." His officers looked at each other. "Captain, that's a Varnak cruiser. I know what it is," Rourke said, his voice steady. "You see another ship here ready to make a stand?" "No, sir." "Then it's us." The Solace launched every drone, armed every torpedo, and powered its main cannon, an old fusion lance that hadn't been used in 5 years. The crew braced. Everyone knew it was a suicide mission. Everyone except Rourke. Or maybe he knew and didn't care. The Varnak opened fire first. Blue plasma arcs tore through space, lighting up the void. Shields screamed under the pressure. One of the outer hull compartments burst into flame, and still Rourke barked orders like a man playing chess instead of facing death. "Divert power from the life support on Deck 4, he shouted. "I want those damn guns back online." He made every shot count. The Solace ducked, dodged, and struck back like a rabid animal. Smaller Varnak escorts were the first to go, caught off guard by the aggressive tactics. One exploded into a cloud of fire and debris. The other was crippled and drifted off into the black, its engines dead. Then it was just the Runvak and one human ship. Rourke stood up from his chair, watching the colossal cruiser loom on the screen. "Let's dance, you oversized lizard." The Runvak underestimated him. It moved in slow, steady, powerful. It wasn't built for quick kills. It expected fear, surrender, hopelessness. But Rourke didn't give them that. He gave them hell. The Solace rammed forward in a move no sane captain would have tried, slid under the Varnak's belly, and fired 2 torpedoes point blank at its undercarriage. The resulting explosion cracked through the Runvak's lower shield barrier, and for the first time in decades, a Varnak cruiser limped. Rourke grinned, blood on his forehead, sparks flying behind him. "Welcome to humanity, bastards." And out there, across the stars, as military channels lit up and desperate calls were made, one message repeated over and over: "The line is holding." The damage to the Runvak wasn't fatal, but it was humiliating. The Varnak didn't just conquer, they obliterated. Entire star systems had vanished under their iron grip. And yet here, at the edge of some forgotten system orbiting a yellow dwarf, one primitive ship had managed to tear through their armor. Not because it was stronger, but because it was angry. The Solace didn't retreat. It couldn't. The engines were overheating. The left stabilizer was half blown off, and 2 decks were without power. Medbay was filled with groaning bodies, and the lights flickered like the ship itself was gasping for breath. But Rourke stood tall in the middle of it all. His first officer, Lieutenant Vega, had a nasty burn across her cheek, and a makeshift sling around her arm, but her eyes were still sharp. "Captain, we need to retreat to Titan. We're running on fumes." "And if we go, they'll burn every colony between here and Earth," Rourke said, scanning the status screen. "They need time. We're gonna buy it." "How? With prayers and duct tape?" Rourke gave a tired smirk. "Prayers are optional. Duct tape's holding engineering together, actually." The crew laughed, a bitter, cracked sound. But it helped. They were soldiers, sure, trained to fight. But this? This was survival against a goddamn monster. And their captain, somehow, still had fight in him. The Runvak didn't make the same mistake twice. Its next assault came hard and precise. Plasma beams lanced toward the Solus with surgical accuracy. The shields flared white, then collapsed entirely. Hull breaches opened on decks 3 and 5. A firestorm devoured the lower cargo bay. 27 crew members lost their lives in an instant. Rourke didn't flinch. He marched to the tactical display and started plotting an intercept course. "They think we're dying," he said, half to himself. "Let's show them what dying humans can do." The Solus didn't fight back with strength. It fought back with desperation. Rourke ordered every last warhead in the arsenal prepped for close-range detonation. He turned the ship into a flying minefield. "They come too close," he told the gunnery chief. "Light 'em up. I want that cruiser to choke on our fury." When the Runvak moved in for the kill, expecting another easy demolition, it was met with wave after wave of shrapnel, molten debris, and kamikaze drones screaming across its flanks. It didn't stop the cruiser, but it slowed it. And in war, even a few minutes can change everything. Because while Rourke was holding the line, the rest of humanity was waking up. Earth's High Command received his last transmission, partially scrambled and glitching, but the message was clear. "We are not backing down. If this is our grave, we'll bury them with us." Those words hit Earth like a bolt of lightning. Civilian networks broadcast the message worldwide. Colonists on Mars, miners on Europa, freighter pilots and ex-Marines, everyone watched the lone ship standing against the impossible. Rourke wasn't just buying time. He was lighting a fire in the heart of a species. On the bridge of the Solus, Rourke wiped sweat from his brow and glanced at the cracked viewport. The Runvak was damaged again, scorch marks along its side, flickering lights along its underhull. It wasn't used to this kind of fight. It wasn't used to being challenged. "They'll call for reinforcements soon," Vega said. "So will we," Rourke replied. "And for the first time in history, humanity might actually show up." He didn't know it yet, but halfway across the system, a half-retired dreadnought called the Vanguard was warming up its engines. A Martian war clan had intercepted the signal and were already en route. Even a civilian convoy from Saturn, armed with illegal railguns and an unhealthy amount of rage, was jumping in. The Varnak had awakened something they didn't understand. Not a war machine, not a military force. They'd awakened humanity. The Runvak paused its advance. Not out of fear. It didn't understand that emotion, but confusion. This resistance was illogical. According to its war protocols, species in early galactic stages lacked the ability to respond to overwhelming force. They submitted. They scattered. But the Solus had not only resisted, it had inflicted damage. Worse, more human ships were appearing on long-range scans. Crude by Varnak standards, unorganized and mismatched. But they were coming, and fast. Aboard the Solus, Rourke stood over the command console, eyes bloodshot, face smeared with ash. His voice cracked over the internal comms. "All hands, listen up, we got incoming, friendlies! They're answering the call!" A beat of silence, then cheers, muted by fatigue, grief, but real. It was hope, the kind you taste after you've swallowed nothing but dread. Lieutenant Vega leaned over the display. 3 ships just dropped out of warp. The Vanguard, the Osiris, and, oh God, that's the Iron Widow. That's a Martian war clan flagship. Rourke grinned through the pain in his side. Tell him the line still holds. Outside, space shimmered as the newcomers fell into formation behind the battered Solus. The Vanguard, twice its size, armed with mass drivers older than Earth's constitution, broadcast a single line on all channels. To whoever's knocking, Earth's not home. Try hell. The Runvak's command AI adjusted its threat assessment. Humans were no longer classified as developing species. They were upgraded to disruptive force. It responded with escalation. From hyperspace, it summoned reinforcements. 2 additional destroyer-class Varnak vessels. Sleek, jagged monsters with blood-red cores. Their arrival sent ripples through the stars like a deep growl in the dark. On the Solus, warning sirens howled again. The crew didn't flinch this time. Rourke looked toward the viewport. So, they brought friends. Looks like it's a party, Vega muttered, buckling into her seat. The Iron Widow moved first, breaking formation and blasting toward the closest Varnak destroyer like a missile of rage. Martians had a reputation for being unhinged. They wore their scars like medals, their weapons illegal in every civilized system. They didn't care. They'd seen what the Varnak did to a settlement near Ceres. Burned it from orbit, no survivors. The Martians hadn't forgotten. They never did. The clash was chaos. Lasers lit up the void. Metal screamed and exploded in silence. The Osiris flanked left, peppering the second destroyer with railgun slugs. The Vanguard unleashed a volley of fusion torpedoes that punched holes through enemy shielding. And still, in the middle of it all, holding the front like a stubborn ghost, stood the Solus. Half dead, leaking coolant but unmoving. They're focusing on us again, Vega called. That cruiser wants us gone. It's ignoring the others. Because we embarrassed it, Rourke muttered. Good. Let's piss it off some more. He keyed into engineering. How's my cannon, Voss? Chief Voss coughed through static. Held together by spit duct tape and a prayer to Newton, sir. That's enough. The fusion lance hadn't been fired since the first volley. Now it hummed with a soft, threatening glow. Rourke narrowed his eyes at the Runvak on screen. Line it up. I want to punch through its eye socket. As the Solus maneuvered, dodging plasma bolts with sluggish grace, the crew felt something shift. They weren't prey anymore. They were the anchor, the symbol. Other human ships were arriving, smaller vessels, armed freighters, even a damn asteroid tug with explosives strapped to its side. Humanity wasn't organized, but they were relentless, angry, united. In a galaxy used to folding civilizations like napkins, this didn't make sense. But that's what made humans dangerous. They didn't follow the script. The Solus reached firing position. Rourke stood, one hand on the control. Fire. The fusion lance unleashed a beam of raw energy, slicing across the stars and tearing into the Runvak's forward hull. Armor buckled. The beam didn't destroy the ship, but it hurt it. Again. The Varnak couldn't understand why this kept happening. Neither could the stars. But every human watching the feed from Earth, Mars, and beyond knew the answer. Because that's what we do. We hold the line. A groan rippled through the Solus as the fusion lance overheated. Lights dimmed, panels sparked, and a small explosion rocked the lower engine bay. But the crew stayed at their stations. They had crossed a threshold now. Past fear, past survival. What kept them going wasn't orders. It was vengeance, pride, the need to show the galaxy that humanity, battered and scattered, would not be erased without a scream. Outside, the Runvak reeled from the blast. Its forward plating was scarred and molten. The Varnak captain, if it could be called that, reeled back from the input streams. Its neural interface was flooded with confusion. Why hadn't the Solus died? Why had it struck back harder? Varnak culture had no word for perseverance. Inside the human fleet, chaos found rhythm. The Vanguard circled wide, drawing fire from the destroyers. The Iron Widow had lost half its plating but continued to hammer its target with relentless precision, Martian war chants blaring across the comms. And the Solus? Still leading. Captain Rourke didn't sit anymore. He paced the bridge like a caged animal, jaw clenched, eyes fixed on the screens. Sweat dripped from his temple. Status on the Runvak? Badly damaged, sir, Vega replied. Its primary weapons are still online, but its shields are dropping below 30%. Then we're not done yet. The Varnak weren't used to fighting enemies that kept attacking after their own ship started falling apart. Their destroyers shifted tactics, attempting to break through the flanks and hit the Earthbound colonies directly. But they didn't get far, because now humanity wasn't just reacting, they were retaliating. From Saturn, a convoy of mining vessels entered the fight, loaded with makeshift warheads built from drilling charges. They weren't military grade, but they didn't have to be. They swarmed the Varnak flank like hornets, slamming into armor, ripping holes through cruisers piece by piece. On Earth, the broadcast was everywhere. Schools shut down, traffic stopped. No one spoke. Everyone just watched this one, ragged ship still holding point, still refusing to move aside. The Solus, a symbol. Captain, Vega called, eyes wide. We're getting a transmission from Earth Defense Command. Rourke raised an eyebrow. About time they joined the conversation. Put it through. A voice came through, distorted but urgent. Captain Rourke, this is General Elena Corvinus. You've bought us hours we didn't have. Reinforcements are en route. Heavy cruisers, destroyer support. ETA 20 minutes. Can you hold? He smiled, voice low and firm. We've been holding. Just get here before we run out of ship. Cheers broke out across the bridge. Not loud, not wild. Just tight, hard claps of relief. They weren't alone anymore. But 20 minutes was still 20 minutes. And the Runvak wasn't giving up. It powered forward, cutting through the void like a wounded beast on a killing run. Plasma turrets lit up, carving through the mining convoy, vaporizing 2 ships in seconds. One destroyer exploded, taking a section of Martian fighters with it. The Iron Widow limped back, engines flickering. The human line faltered. On the Solus, Lieutenant Vega shouted, "We've got a breach on Deck 6. Hull integrity failing." "Seal it off!" Rourke barked. "Emergency pressure lock. Reroute coolant to the main engine core. We're going to ram if we have to." "Captain," Vega started, but he cut her off with a raised hand. "If we die loud." The crew braced. The Solus turned. One last charge, one last scream in the face of extinction, and just as the ship's engines surged forward, ready to go out in fire, the stars behind them lit up. 3 Earth cruisers dropped from warp. The Dauntless, the Erebus, and the Pillar of Autumn, massive, hulking beasts of war, guns charged and aimed. Rourke laughed, breathless. "You're late." The Dauntless fired first. Twin plasma mortars slammed into the Runvak, splitting its flank. The Pillar of Autumn followed, battering the remaining destroyer until it cracked open like a steel egg. The line didn't break. The line surged forward. The battlefield transformed the moment Earth's warships entered the fray. Where there was chaos, now came coordination. Where there was desperation, now surged fury. The Dauntless led the charge, its massive dorsal cannon firing volley after volley into the Varnak line. The soundless impact of its shots in space was a kind of poetry, beautiful, brutal, and exact. The Erebus followed on its flank, peeling off enemy fire like it was swatting flies, its shield system centuries ahead of what the Solus could manage. But no ship, not even these giants, drew more eyes than the Solus. Scorched, lopsided. One engine barely holding together, and still holding the line like it was tethered to history itself. Captain Rourke stood in silence, arms crossed as the human fleet unleashed hell. He didn't smile. Not yet. "We got comms from the Pillar of Autumn," Vega said, breathless. "Admiral Dreyfus wants to speak directly." "Tell him to hold," Rourke replied, still staring out the cracked viewport. "We've got unfinished business." The Runvak was retreating, bleeding sparks and core fluid from gaping wounds across its hull. The pride of the Varnak fleet, their conqueror of stars, was in full reverse, shield generators flickering like dying candles. But Rourke wasn't going to let it get away. Not after all this. He turned to Vega, voice low and cold. "That thing torched colonies, burned our people alive. If it leaves, it'll come back with an armada. We end it now." Vega didn't argue. She just nodded. Engineering was a wreck. Voss coughed through the fumes on comms, his voice ragged. "Captain, she's barely hanging together. One more push might rip us in half." "I know," Rourke said. "That's why you'll need to time it perfectly." The plan was madness. No backup strategy. No escape pods ready. Just raw force and a very precise detonation. They were going to ride straight into the Runvak's weakened flank and set off every last warhead on the Solus, manually triggered, point blank, where the cruiser's shield matrix was already failing. It was suicide. But Rourke didn't care. He sent a fleet-wide transmission. "All ships, stand clear of the Solus. We're making one final pass. Admiral, if we don't make it out, finish the job." For a brief moment, silence reigned. Then the Dauntless cut its engines and pulled back, clearing a path. The Solus turned, broken nose pointing directly at the Varnak war cruiser. The stars shimmered behind it, and the fire of vengeance burned ahead. Inside the Runvak, panic stirred, mechanical, calculated, yet real. The humans weren't retreating. The logic array scrambled to make sense of it. Species under threat did not accelerate toward death, but humans did. The Solus went full burn, every engine screaming. Hull plating tore loose from the pressure. Fire erupted on 2 decks. The bridge lights died. Systems went dark. Still, the ship moved forward. The Varnak cruiser tried to turn away. Too slow. Rourke stood at the manual detonation panel, key in hand. Vega strapped herself to the railing, her voice steady but wet with tears. "See you on the other side, Captain." He looked at her, then at the panel, and inserted the key. And then, just as his hand hovered over the trigger, "This is the Erebus! Hold your fire! The Runvak is venting core! It's done, Rourke! You broke its spine!" He froze. On the screen, the massive cruiser shuddered. Its central engine flared, then collapsed inward. Blue light surged down its body, a cascade of uncontrolled overloads. The Runvak didn't explode. It crumbled. Piece by piece, like a dying star, it broke apart into silence and dust. No detonation needed. The Solus stopped short, less than 500 meters from the remains, barely alive. The crew sat in silence. Then cheers, sobs, screams of exhausted relief. Captain Rourke stepped away from the panel, legs weak, breathing shallow. "Cancel the fireworks," he muttered. "I'm getting too old for martyrdom." And just like that, humanity had done the impossible. They hadn't just survived. They had held the line and broken the invincible. The debris from the Runvak floated across the void like drifting bones of a fallen god. For the first time in living memory, a Varnak cruiser had been destroyed. Not by a superior force, not by advanced tech, but by what the Varnak once called a primitive species. And worse, by a single ship that should have never survived the first salvo. The Solus was towed back to the outer orbit of Titan by the Pillar of Autumn, its hull sparking, engines silent, but its name now burned into history. Every newsfeed across the colonies replayed the footage. The last charge, the crumbling Runvak, the battered ship refusing to die. Captain Elijah Rourke, broken ribs and all, walked down the ramp as the docking bay hissed open, the gravity plating humming beneath his feet. His uniform was scorched, eyes red, knuckles bloodied. But he stood tall. He was greeted not by fanfare, not by generals, but by silence and a sea of eyes. Engineers, soldiers, medics, civilians who had risked everything to get the message out. Survivors, believers. The silence held for a beat, then applause. Not polite, not rehearsed. It exploded through the hangar like a war cry, echoing off every wall, building in waves until even Rourke, tired, scarred, had to close his eyes and take a shaky breath. But not everyone was cheering. In the command tower above the dock, General Elena Corvinus watched the scene with folded arms and a scowl. She hadn't wanted this. Heroes made people harder to control. She turned to her aide. Has EarthGov authorized an official commendation? They're debating it, the aide said carefully. The Solus acted without formal clearance. They're discussing protocol breaches, collateral loss, unauthorized combat engagement. Bullshit, Corvinus snapped. They want to downplay him before he becomes a symbol they can't manage. And he was a symbol now. Across Mars, graffiti read, "Hold the line." On Earth, children played games pretending to be Captain Rourke of the Solus. On Europa, a woman kissed a photo of her dead brother who had died aboard the Solus and whispered, "You stopped them." But far beyond the outer colonies, in the deep, cold stretches of space, the Varnak were not mourning. They were watching. The shattered Runvak had broadcast its last moments to the Empire before it died. The footage, corrupted and glitchy, still showed what mattered. A human ship, defiant to the end, refusing to move. The Varnak's high executor watched the loop over and over, his claws twitching in irritation. A dozen warlords debated in their native tongue. Sibilant, guttural, hateful. They did not mourn the loss of a ship. They mourned the loss of certainty. The humans had disrupted the order of things. This was not a resistance. This was infection. And the Varnak only had one answer to infection: extermination. Send the writ of retaliation, the High Executor hissed. The humans are no longer to be studied or monitored. They are to be erased. All of them. Back in Sol system, Earth's political council scrambled. Half the senators wanted to negotiate, believing that diplomacy could still stop a war. The other half demanded rearmament. And then there was the new faction. Young, militant, inspired by Rourke. Colonists, engineers, smugglers, ex-soldiers, and students. They didn't wait for governments. They organized online, calling themselves the Solus Legion. They pledged to defend humanity by any means, with or without permission. They wore patches stitched with one phrase: "We hold the line." Rourke didn't want fame. He didn't want politics. But in the aftermath, as medals were tossed at him like apologies, he realized something. This wasn't the end. The Varnak would return. And next time, they wouldn't underestimate humanity. 3 weeks passed since the battle. The Solus, barely a ship anymore, more like a floating coffin wrapped in legend, rested in dry dock above Mars. Engineers swarmed over it like ants on a dying tree, debating whether to scrap or preserve it. Politicians wanted it as a museum piece. Soldiers wanted it reforged into something deadlier. But the people? The people wanted it remembered exactly how it was. Wounded, but undefeated. Captain Elijah Rourke sat alone in a hospital wing at Armstrong Base, half his ribs still wrapped, one lung recovering from vacuum exposure. The room was quiet, clean, lifeless, the kind of sterile peace that made him itch. A soft knock broke the silence. He didn't turn. Doors open. Lieutenant Vega stepped in, her arm still in a sling, a slight limp in her walk. She looked tired, but sharper somehow, hardened. They hadn't spoken much since the battle. Everyone had been scattered across fleets, councils, briefings. The system was still spinning. "You're alive," she said, walking in and dropping a bag of lukewarm Martian coffee on the side table. "Regrettably," he grunted. "They fixed me up so I could sit in more goddamn interviews." She chuckled. "The admirals love you now. You're a propaganda machine." "Yeah? Let them put them in a ship held together with chewing gum and spite next time." He sipped the bitter drink and leaned back, groaning as his ribs protested. "EarthGov's splitting," she said after a moment. "Half want to prepare for war. Half think we should beg for peace." "They won't get peace," Rourke said quietly. "Not after what we did. Not after the Runvak. They're calling it a fluke." He turned, meeting her eyes. "We humiliated them, Vega. And humiliation for an empire like that? It's like blood in the water. They have to answer it. They'll come back." She nodded. "I think they already have." She tossed a data chip onto his tray. "Intercepted signals. Fringe colonies have gone dark. No word from Talon's Reach. A freighter limped into Europa orbit with half its hull gone. Pilot swears it was a Varnak scout wing. Small, fast, testing the outer lines." Rourke clenched his jaw. "Recon before the hammer. And EarthGov's too busy debating budget logistics and treaty wording. They're not ready. We're not ready." They sat in silence for a moment, the hum of the med equipment the only sound between them. Then Vega leaned in. "I want to rebuild the Solace." Rourke blinked. "Rebuild?" "Not restore, not preserve. Rebuild. Make her stronger, smarter, faster, but keep the soul of her. Keep what made her ours." He looked at her for a long time. "They won't authorize that," she smirked. "Already started. The Solus Legion has engineers volunteering from all over, even Martian tech smiths. Half of them used to be criminals. Other half probably still are." He couldn't help but smile. Damn pirates are finally good for something. Vega leaned forward, more serious now. "We can't wait for EarthGov to decide who we are. We already showed the galaxy who we are. Now we need to be ready to show them again. Bigger." Rourke nodded slowly. "You get the ship. I'll get the crew." Far across space, in a cold void known only as Sector 9-5 Tau, the Varnak War Council convened in darkness. Their language was jagged, aggressive, filled with clicks and growls that sounded like metal grinding against bone. But in that massive, torch-lit chamber, no voices were raised, only the hiss of strategy. A new campaign had been approved, not for conquest, for annihilation. The Sol system was to be erased, not subjugated, not studied, not spared. An overseer drone skittered forward, projecting a distorted image of the Solus, damaged, glowing, firing into the Runvak before it collapsed. One of the Varnak warlords snapped his claw against the stone floor, hard enough to crack it. "They remember the name," the translator bot whispered into Terran Standard. "We will burn it from their memory." 30 Varnak destroyers were activated, 5 command dreadnoughts, 1 World Killer-class siege engine. They were not coming to fight Earth. They were coming to cleanse it. On Earth, Rourke stood in front of a growing crowd on the launch platform at Luna Prime. He hated speeches, hated politics. But this one mattered. Behind him, the Solus hung suspended in scaffold beams, still missing entire plates of armor. But beneath the broken frame, engines had been replaced, weapons upgraded. She had a new core, and a new name: Solus Requiem. Rourke stepped forward, gripping the rail. "I don't have a speech," he said, voice echoing through the dome. "I don't have quotes from dead leaders or fancy slogans." He looked at the crowd. Martians, Earthers, Jovians, colonists, soldiers, even pirates. "All I have is what I saw." He paused, took a breath. "I saw us holding the line when everyone thought we'd run. I saw us bleed and burn and break, together. I saw an empire blink, for the first time in centuries, because of one ship and a crew that refused to kneel." He leaned forward, eyes locked on theirs. "They're coming. And next time they won't come for battle. They'll come to wipe us out. And I say we don't give them the chance." The crowd was dead silent. Then someone yelled, "We hold the line!" And another, "We hold the line!" And it grew, a chant, a roar, a wave. Rourke smiled grimly. The line would hold. But this time it wouldn't be one ship. It would be a fleet. The stars looked calm before the end. From the edge of Sol system, they appeared as pinpricks of peace, cold, beautiful, distant. But just beyond Pluto's icy grave, hidden in the black, the Varnak armada emerged from the void. It wasn't a fleet, it was a sentence. 30 destroyers, 5 dreadnoughts, and in the middle of them, eclipsing even the light of distant stars, floated the HFY, the world killer. A siege engine older than many planets, capable of turning Earth's crust into vapor. Humanity's last transmission had been simple: "We are still here." And this was the Varnak's answer. Inside the HFY's command core, 1 billion nanowires pulsed across the neural chamber, feeding information directly into the overmind. It wasn't a being. It was vengeance, encoded and sentient. The Varnak didn't want prisoners. They didn't want surrender. They wanted to make an example. But this time, Earth was waiting. Near Saturn's orbit, the newly born Solus Requiem hummed with power, stronger, sleeker, still scarred with the memory of its last stand. But now, reborn as a war machine crafted by unity, rage, and defiance. Captain Elijah Rourke sat in the command chair, every nerve alight. His bones still ached from the last fight. His mind still carried the ghosts of the ones they lost. But his heart was ready. "All ships, report in," Vega called out, seated at his right, her voice cutting through the static like fire. One by one they came online. The Vanguard, Iron Widow, Osiris, Pillar of Autumn, then dozens more. Ships that hadn't existed weeks ago. Civilian convoys now armed with warheads. Retired freighters converted into missile barges. Even a few black market stealth rigs, their crews grinning like wolves in the dark. The Solus Legion was no longer a symbol. It was an army. Rourke rose slowly, his voice steady on the open comm. "Make no mistake. They're not just coming for our worlds. They're coming to erase our existence. They want us forgotten." He looked at every screen, at every crew. "They call this their galaxy. They think we're just an inconvenience. Well, today we remind them who the real problem is." A pause. "Today we hold the line again." He sat, and space exploded. The first wave hit like a tsunami of light and metal. Varnak destroyers surged forward, firing plasma lances and quantum disruptors, tearing into the human formation with ruthless precision. The Iron Widow took the brunt, its Martian hull groaning but unbroken. The Osiris launched counterstrike missiles, saturating the dark with clouds of flame. For every human ship that fell, another surged into its place. They didn't scatter. They didn't retreat. They pushed. The Solus Requiem was everywhere. Rourke drove it like a blade between ribs, weaving through enemy fire, targeting weak points, smashing apart 2 destroyers in the first 5 minutes of battle. Her fusion lance now fired in precise bursts, each one tearing through enemy armor like paper. But then came the HFY. A single pulse from its central cannon sliced through space and vaporized 3 ships instantly. The explosion lit the void, sending shockwaves across the battlefield. Vega screamed over comms. HFY is charging for another shot. Rourke didn't blink. Close the distance. Get under it. That monster was built to break planets, not people. The Solus Requiem burned hard toward the HFY, dodging debris and weaving between enemy lines. Other ships followed, Vanguard laying down cover fire, Erebus launching drones in all directions, swarm tactics in full effect. But it wasn't enough. One by one, the dreadnoughts began to move. Not fast, but deliberately, targeting Earth's orbital stations, humanity's heart. Rourke saw it. He felt it in his bones. They're going for the kill. He opened fleet-wide comms. All hands, this is it. Every ounce of power, every shot you've got. We take the HFY down, or Earth burns. The approach was hell. 3 more human ships exploded before they got within firing range. The Solus shook under direct impact, flames licking the control deck. Vega was bleeding from the temple, and Rourke's hands trembled from a fractured wrist. But they kept going. The final volley was a suicide run. "Target its core," Rourke shouted, "and prep the charge." Vega looked at him. "You're not doing this again." "We don't detonate us, we plant it," he said through gritted teeth. "We're not dying heroes, we're survivors with a vendetta." With the HFY's defenses torn open by the combined fire of the Pillar of Autumn and Dauntless, the Solus Requiem plunged into its belly like a dagger. Rourke and Vega personally led a boarding team onto the enemy dreadnought, fighting through Varnak drones and breathing in recycled fire-scorched air. They made it to the core chamber. The thing pulsed like a dark heart. Rourke stared at it, whispered, "Time to return the favor." They planted the fusion bomb, set it to a delayed trigger, and sprinted like hell. Back aboard the Requiem, the engines were barely holding. The crew was running on willpower and adrenaline. The human fleet had fallen back, beaten and broken, but watching. And then, light. The HFY detonated from the inside, a slow, swelling bloom of white that lit the stars like a second sun. Varnak systems collapsed instantly. Their dreadnoughts blinked offline. Their formation fell apart. They hadn't just lost a ship. They lost their god. And they ran. For the first time in history, the Varnak retreated. Humanity, scarred, bloodied, half-ruined, stood alone in the ashes of a would-be grave. And once again, across every channel, every world, every tongue, the message went out. The line held. Months later, at a quiet memorial on Earth, they unveiled a statue. Not of a hero, but of a ship. The Solus, carved in burnished stone, aimed forever skyward. Beneath it, the words etched in metal. They came for our extinction. We gave them resistance. And when all seemed lost, we held the line. Rourke stood nearby, older now, still healing. But when children ran past and saluted the statue, he allowed himself one small smile. Because he knew. The galaxy would never forget Earth again. We trusted them. That was our first mistake. We thought the Zolari were like us, proud, honorable, loyal. We stood shoulder to shoulder in the first galactic war against the Variks. We bled for their colonies, died defending their starports. We even opened Earth's own vaults to fuel their fleets. And when the Variks turned their tide and came howling through the sector, who do you think left us to rot? The Zolari. Their ships pulled out of orbit mid-battle. No warning, no goodbye, just gone. We watched our skies light up with plasma and ash, while their diplomats fed the galactic media some slick lie about a strategic repositioning. Yeah, right. Tell that to the screaming civilians we couldn't evacuate in time? Tell that to my squad, vaporized on the surface of Nova 3 while waiting for air support that never came. They didn't just betray us, they abandoned us, sacrificed us to save their soft-skinned, silicon-fed civilization. And they thought we'd just take it? Not this time. It's been 5 years. We rebuilt. In silence, in fury. The Earth Council went dark, off-grid, no comms, no broadcasts. The galaxy thought we'd gone extinct. Truth is, we were preparing. Every nation unified under one name, the Black Flag Pact. Not peacekeepers, not politicians, predators. We learned from every war, every betrayal. We studied their weaknesses, mapped their trade routes, intercepted their encrypted channels. We didn't just build ships. We built something more. Weapons that think, armor that adapts, soldiers forged in pain and programmed for vengeance. They didn't see us coming. Our first strike hit the Zalari moon outposts. No warnings, no speeches, just explosions that turned crystal domes into clouds of debris. Their command centers tried to call for backup. We jammed their systems, hacked their feeds, let them scream into the void. I was on the ground that day. Name's Grady Vorn, former captain, now commander of the Harbinger Division. We don't wear ranks anymore, just scars and silence. I remember stepping onto that charred lunar base. The air was thin, red lights flashing through the smoke. One of their officers tried to surrender. Some polished Zalari noble, half-draped in gold silk. He begged. Said it was all a misunderstanding. Said he had no idea Earth was betrayed. I looked him in the eye. You didn't need to know, I told him. You just needed to help. Then I pulled the trigger. That became our motto. No speeches, no second chances. Helped or didn't. Lived or died. The pact spread like a shadow. One by one, we're taking their colonies, their ships, their resources. We're not conquering. We're reclaiming. Every power cell we rip from their hands is one they stole from us. Every city we torch is a warning. We're not sorry. The galaxy now whispers about Earth like it's a ghost story. A species once noble, now savage. But they forget who made us this way. We were loyal. They made us monsters. And now we're coming for everything they've got. We hit the Zalari Central Nexus on cycle 1043. A day burned into my bones. The Nexus wasn't just their capital. It was their pride, their precious shining jewel. Floating above their homeworld like a monument to their superiority, it was a city-sized fortress cradled in orbit, layered with defense grids, shimmering with light, and guarded by fleets we used to help design. Yeah, Earth tech powered half their systems. Another insult. We knew their protocols. We wrote their damn encryption. The irony? They never updated it. Too proud. Too arrogant. They thought we were gone, and ghosts don't hack satellites, so we slipped in through their blind spots, dead zones we remembered from the war. Inside, we hijacked their network from the core outward. I led the breach squad, just 5 of us. No need for more. We weren't ordinary soldiers. The pact had changed us. We were engineered for this. We called ourselves the Gutted, because whatever humanity we had before, it had been carved out to make space for this new purpose. I remember the moment we broke through the main vault doors. Zalari civilians running, guards panicking, alarms screaming in 12 dialects. Behind me, Corin, massive, skin like iron, more beast than man, planted a sonic charge and blew the vault open like paper. Inside, rows of plasma-stabilized currency, Zalari Crown data cores, trade agreements with over 60 worlds, wealth beyond reckoning. We torched it all. They didn't understand. This wasn't about money. This was about memory. I looked one of their diplomats in the eye as he crawled out from under rubble, glass cutting through his blue ceremonial robes. He wheezed something about peace, about mercy. Peace? I spat, dragging him up by the collar. Where was your peace when we begged for support at Hector 9? When we broadcasted distress from Cinderline for 12 hours straight and you shut off your relays? He tried to speak, but I didn't let him. I jammed a data pad into his chest, the one that held a video feed from that day. Thousands of humans, burning, choking, crushed under collapsed domes, calling for help that never came. Then I dropped him and let him crawl back into the ash. He lived. I made sure of it. Some scars aren't meant to bleed. They're meant to haunt. By cycle 1050, we controlled over 30 of their worlds. Not because we held territory. We didn't care about borders. We struck, stripped them bare, and vanished. They called us the Shadow Plague. Said we were viruses, demons. The Galactic Council tried to step in. Fools. They sent envoys, mediators, half-human, half-synthetic diplomats trained to de-escalate aggression. We returned one of them in a pod, alive, unharmed, but stripped of all synthetics. We left a message carved into the hull in 7 languages. Do not speak peace to those you condemned to war. That's when they realized. We weren't negotiating. We weren't asking. We were taking. And then we found Project Virex. It was buried deep beneath the Zalari moon of Varnix, a planet they swore was uninhabited. Another lie. We cracked the moon open like an egg and found the labs. Hidden chambers, stasis pods, forbidden tech. We weren't the only ones they betrayed. Inside those pods, humans, our people. Soldiers who'd gone missing during the First War. The Zalari hadn't just abandoned them. They'd taken them, used them, experimented. They spliced our DNA with Varix biocode, tried to create a hybrid soldier, thought they could perfect the human body, enhance it, dominate it. They failed, but not before destroying hundreds of lives in the process. We revived the few who could be saved. What they told us, it shattered whatever restraint we had left. My second-in-command, Dren, stood silent for hours after hearing the stories. He never was a talker, but something in him died that day. That night, we declared the Reckoning Protocol. No more mercy, no more propaganda. The Pact began extermination campaigns, surgical, precise. We targeted research facilities, gene labs, black site prisons, not just to destroy them, but to broadcast it. We wanted every Zalari citizen to know this wasn't random, this was justice. And they responded. Oh, they screamed. On every channel they called us war criminals, terrorists, said we were genocidal. But here's the part they always leave out. We learned that from them. Every tactic, every weapon, every silent scream in the night. We didn't invent that. They did. We just perfected it. By the time we reached Zalari Prime, their homeworld, their fleets had crumbled. Their orbital defenses malfunctioned under our hacks. Their military leaders had either defected or killed themselves. I landed personally. No helmet, no mask. I wanted them to see my face, to remember it. The Zalari High Council was waiting, huddled in their marble chamber, too proud to run, too weak to fight. Their prime speaker, this withered creature draped in silk and shame, tried to offer a deal. Territory, trade rights, apologies. He started with, "Commander Vorn, we regret—" "Stop," I said, cutting him off. I reached into my coat and tossed a blood-stained photograph onto the floor. It slid across the polished tile until it landed at his feet. The image was burned, cracked, almost faded. But you could still make out the 3 figures. My wife, my daughter, my son, smiling in front of a cratered home on Nova 3. They died waiting for a rescue that never came. The council went silent. "Regret doesn't fix bones," I said. "It doesn't unburn skin. It doesn't bring back the screams." I raised my weapon. Half the room flinched. "Your empire ends tonight," I told them. "You don't get to erase what you did. You don't get to crawl behind politics and say you're sorry." And then I walked away. I didn't have to pull the trigger. That honor went to the gutted. Every man and woman in that chamber was judged and executed by survivors of their betrayal. I watched from the outside, listening to their screams echo through the walls like music. We didn't just win, we rewrote the stars. The pact remains, not as a government, not as rulers, as watchers, enforcers. Every time a species raises its head to whisper betrayal, we remind them. We are the consequence. And Earth? Earth is no longer just a blue dot on some galactic chart. Earth is a warning, a memory that never fades, a shadow that never forgives. They didn't understand. We weren't fighting for closure. We were fighting to make sure no one ever forgot what happened when Earth was betrayed. So we kept going. The pact moved like fire through dry brush, and we had no interest in diplomacy. The Zalari hadn't acted alone. There were others who stood by during our fall, who watched humanity suffer and chose silence. The Risari Confederation, the Ulmor Union, the great bureaucratic giants of the galactic stage. Oh, they didn't drop bombs or launch invasions. No, they were cleaner, more polite. They just turned away, withdrew funding, blocked humanitarian aid, froze our accounts while we buried millions. That made them guilty. It didn't. We hit their floating city of Orusk with precision plasma strikes, timed to collapse the outer shields and shut down life support. Not instantly, no. We wanted them to feel it, the gasps, the cold, the realization that their so-called clean hands were covered in our blood. We didn't take their resources. We left them to rot in the heavens. Next were the Ulmor. They were worse. They claimed they'd offered to help us after the betrayal, that they'd sent relief ships and supplies. They lied. We had records. Ships full of food and medicine, rerouted away from human colonies and accidentally redirected to Zalari-controlled systems. Stolen. We found human refugees on Ulmor prison ships, detained for security concerns. Children, elderly, survivors. We liberated them. Then we returned the favor. The Ulmor capital city of Brelan was a fortress, buried in the ice caverns of their tundra world, guarded by mech towers and ion cannons. It took us 3 weeks, not because it was hard, because we wanted to enjoy it. I led that mission too. My team and I breached the southern gate after their elite guards fell. We didn't kill civilians. That was never our way. But the Ulmor elite, their military leaders, their puppet masters, they weren't civilians. They were architects of abandonment. I remember standing in their central hall, flames licking up the crystal walls, their once proud generals kneeling in the ash. One of them, tall and bone-thin, looked up at me with hollow eyes. "We did what we thought was right," he said. I laughed. "You stood by and watched us die." He didn't reply. "Next time," I added, pressing my weapon to his chest, "do the wrong thing. At least then you'll bleed for it." We didn't just win battles, we rewrote alliances. For centuries, Earth was seen as primitive, emotional, impulsive, fragile. But now, species that once mocked us began to bend the knee. Not because they believed in our cause, because they were afraid. That suited us fine. The Black Flag Pact became a myth, a curse. Mercenaries swore never to take contracts against Earth. Pirate fleets refused to raid human freighters. Even the Variks, our old enemies, offered us peace. And we accepted it. Strange, isn't it? The monsters we fought were the ones who never betrayed us. The Variks fought us with honor. Brutal, but honest. No lies, no backstabbing, just war. I respected that. They sent an emissary, a war breed, armored in flesh steel, knelt before me at the ruins of Orusk, and offered their ancient blade, a sign of truce. "You," he said, voice deep and crackling, "are what we always feared humans would become." I took the blade. "And you," I replied, "are what we became because no one else feared us." That sealed it. An alliance between Earth and the Variks, unthinkable a decade ago, now forged in mutual hatred for the same cowards. But even as we carved our names into the stars, I couldn't escape the ghosts. At night, in the silence of my quarters aboard the warship Vigil, I'd watch old footage, memories burned into data chips before Nova 3 fell. My daughter laughing in the snow, my wife teasing me about my beard, my son asking if I'd be home in time for his birthday. They never made it to the shelter. They trusted the system. They died believing someone would come. Sometimes I wonder if they'd even recognize me now, if they'd understand what I became, or if they'd be horrified. Corin once told me, "You ain't the man who lost his family. You're the man who made the galaxy pay for it." Maybe that's true. Maybe that's all I've become. But I don't regret a second. Every world we take, every leader we expose, every system we break, it brings us closer to balance, to justice, to memory. There was one last name on the list. The Terral Dominion, the ones who whispered in the Zalari's ears, the ones who funded their withdrawal and called it strategy. They stayed hidden behind corporate networks and legal walls, claiming they were just investors. Turns out they were the ones who advised the Zalari to pull out of Nova 3 in the first place. They ran everything from the shadows, the war, the betrayal, even the propaganda afterward. Their CEO, an ancient figure known only as the Spine, had never shown his face. But we found him, buried deep within a space fortress orbiting a dying star. He thought he was safe. He wasn't. We boarded with a crew of 6. Only 2 of us walked out. We lost Dren in the breach, took a plasma bolt straight to the chest, vaporized instantly. I carried his tags with me. Inside, the Spine was exactly what I expected. A grotesque hybrid of machine and flesh, suspended in a chamber of wires, surrounded by blinking monitors. "You've come to kill me," he said, voice emotionless. "No," I replied. "I came to remind you." I played the footage, every atrocity, every human scream, every betrayal. I made him watch it all, pixel by pixel. He didn't blink. "You think vengeance makes you righteous?" he said. "No," I replied. "It just makes us real." Then I left him alive, stripped his systems, sent his coordinates to every vengeful species in the quadrant. Let them decide his fate. Last I heard, the Variks tore his chamber apart. We didn't have to swing the final blow. We just opened the door. By the end of it all, the stars were different. Maps were redrawn, history rewritten, and Earth? Earth was no longer a planet of diplomats and dreamers. We were executioners. And if anyone ever dared to forget what they did to us, we'd be there. In the silence between transmissions, in the shadows behind negotiations, in the nightmares of those who once turned away, we are Earth. We remember everything, and we take everything they have. It was strange, the quiet that followed. We had dismantled empires, reduced governments to whispers. Our enemies no longer gathered fleets, they gathered lawyers, tried to buy their way out of the reckoning. The Pact didn't respond to diplomacy. We didn't negotiate with hands that once held daggers. The galaxy finally understood. There were no second chances with Earth. But inside the silence, something else started to grow. A different kind of enemy. One without flags or ships. One that lived in the same dark place we had crawled from. Guilt. You see, vengeance is a flame. At first it warms you, keeps you alive when everything else is cold. But the longer you burn, the less you feel. until eventually you forget what it was ever like not to be on fire. And the pact had been burning for a long time. I started noticing it first in the rookies, fresh blood survivors from colony raids or children rescued from Ulmor camps. They were angry, sharp, efficient, but some of them didn't sleep, didn't eat unless ordered. They'd stare too long at scorched fields after a raid. And I'd see it in their eyes. A question. What happens after? We never had an answer. We weren't building anything, just destroying, retaliating. One mission at a time. That worked when the enemy was clear. But the lines had blurred. There was this boy, Cray, only 17. Grew up watching the Pact take back human dignity one world at a time. He begged to join Harbinger Division. Said he wanted to see the galaxy fear Earth. I told him the truth. You won't be seeing anything worth remembering. He didn't care. He was good too. Deadly with a rail rifle, calm under pressure, fast on his feet. But after a mission on Delis Prime, I found him in the aftermath, sitting alone next to a wrecked market square. Not crying, just still. There were bodies around, non-combatants, collateral damage. "What's bothering you?" I asked. He didn't look up, just said, "They screamed like we did." That line stayed with me, because he was right. Somewhere along the way, we'd stopped hearing the screams, stopped telling the difference between the guilty and the unlucky. And I couldn't tell Cray that it was okay, that they deserved it, because I didn't believe it anymore. The next few missions, I started asking more questions. We intercepted a Rasari convoy rumored to be supplying anti-Pact weapons. The intelligence was shaky, unconfirmed. But we were ordered to hit them anyway, and we did. Turned out they weren't carrying weapons. They were carrying refugees, civilians fleeing the last ruins of the war, trying to escape the spreading purge. The Pact silenced the report, called it a necessary mistake. That's when I knew we'd crossed a line. Somewhere, somehow, we became the thing we swore we were punishing. But it wasn't like we could stop. You don't just put a gun down after it's become part of your spine. So I kept going, kept obeying. But I started watching, tracking. Not our enemies, our own leaders. Commandant Revek, the man who replaced the Council after the Reckoning Protocol, he wasn't like us. He hadn't lost family on Nova 3. He hadn't watched comrades rot in abandoned trenches. He came from money, old Earth power. The kind of man who uses fire as a tool, not a wound. He wasn't in it for justice. He was in it for control. I confronted him once, in the middle of a war room briefing. Laid out the facts, missions without intel, civilian casualties, silence on our own internal war crimes. He didn't blink. "Do you want them to forget what they did to us, Vorn?" he asked me. "No," I said, "but I don't want us to forget what we are." His answer? "We're the monsters they made. Let them lie in the bed they built." After that, I was marked. Subtly, at first. Reassigned to outer ring patrols, missions with half the support we needed, communications that mysteriously dropped in the field. One time, my entire squad's atmospheric seals were tampered with. If Corrin hadn't double-checked the suits, we'd be drifting in the void right now. The Pact didn't kill me outright. They knew better. Make a martyr of Vorn, and you risk the older divisions rising up. No, they wanted to make me irrelevant, slow, forgotten. But I didn't vanish. I went underground, used old channels, survivors from the early days, people who still remembered what the Pact was meant to be. We started calling ourselves the Cinder Circle, the last spark of fire that remembered its original purpose. We weren't trying to overthrow the Pact. We were trying to clean it. We began exposing internal corruption, mission logs, intercepted orders, death counts, leaking them across the black net, letting the galaxy see that Earth wasn't the clean blade they feared. We were rusted, cracking, and we needed to choose, become tyrants, or become human again. But it was a dangerous game. One night, while docked at a hidden moon base near Loris, I found a data spike in my bunk, a sleek, silent device used by internal execution teams. Not a weapon. A message. "We see you. They didn't kill me. Not yet." Because I still had value. But that wouldn't last forever. So I made a decision. The only way to fix this wasn't to fight from the shadows. It was to take the fire right back to the heart of the pact itself. I called in every favor, every old comrade who still had loyalty to the truth. Some said no. Some didn't reply. But some were waiting for this. We're going back to Earth. Back to the core vaults. Back to where the pact began. And if I have to burn every last corrupted leader to give us back the soul we lost, then so be it. Because vengeance without restraint becomes tyranny, and we didn't crawl out of Nova 3 just to become what killed us. We are Earth. We do not forget. And now, we remember who we are. Getting back to Earth wasn't easy. The planet was no longer the open blue cradle we remembered from our childhoods. It had become a fortress, orbiting gun satellites, AI-controlled traffic gates, and multiple layers of clearance protocols. Even breathing in the atmosphere legally required biometric ID. They said it was for security. But we all knew the truth. Earth was the Pact's crown, and they weren't about to let anyone close who could tarnish its shine. We didn't go through the gates. We went beneath them. Corin knew a back door, a long-forgotten mining relay hidden beneath the crust of Mars's third moon. It was how the earliest Black Flag operatives moved between the inner planets without alerting the galaxy. We cracked open that tunnel like grave robbers disturbing a sealed tomb. The air stank of stale oxygen and rot, but it got us close. We slipped onto Earth under ghost protocols, silent and untraceable. No official landing. No broadcast. Just the cold hum of stolen stealth rigs and the pressure of what we were about to do. There were only 9 of us left now. The rest had fallen, disappeared, or turned. I won't name them all. Not out of disrespect, out of protection. Even now, I know some of them have family left in the outer rings. If the Pact finds out they helped me, their bloodline won't last the week. We landed in what used to be called New Lisbon. The entire city had been rebuilt after the Varix invasion. Slick towers, neon veins of light, floating trams that whispered silently through the night. But there were no people. The streets were empty. Surveillance drones tracked every breath. Curfews were enforced by synthetic enforcers, their black chrome bodies indistinguishable from the shadows. This wasn't Earth. This was a laboratory. Ravik had turned the birthplace of humanity into a showroom, a perfectly polished example of what order through fear could accomplish. We moved fast, hopping rooftops, cutting through sewers, avoiding every scanner we could. The target was buried in the mountains outside the old Cascadian region, a fortress vault called Ashhold. It wasn't just where the Pact stored its secrets. It was where they buried their betrayals. Deep beneath its reinforced layers were the mission logs, body counts, audio files, and confidential war records that could break the spine of the current regime. It was never supposed to be accessed, not even by command. But we had a code, a 6-word phrase whispered to me by a dying Varix emissary after we helped them destroy the Terran network. Burn the roots to heal Earth. We keyed it into the sub-terminal beneath a hydro pump station a mile outside Ashhold's walls. The ground shook. Doors opened. For a second, I thought we'd made it. But they were waiting. It wasn't a firestorm. It wasn't even soldiers. It was her. Commander Lynn Eneris, my former protege, the last person I ever trusted. She stepped out from the vault corridor like a ghost, wearing the mark of the Pact on her shoulder, a coiled black flag stitched in red. "Grady," she said. Her voice hadn't changed. "You shouldn't be here," she added. I stepped forward. "Neither should you." She looked tired, not just from the fight, from the weight of pretending she wasn't dying inside every day. "You think you're going to fix this," she said, "with files, with truth. It won't matter. The galaxy doesn't want truth, it wants peace, at any cost." I didn't argue. I just said, "Then let them hear what peace really costs." She pulled a pistol, didn't aim it, just held it, like it might make her decision easier. "I begged them not to turn Ashhold into a lie," she whispered, "but I couldn't stop it. You don't stop the flood, you drown." "You swim," I said, "even if it kills you." The standoff lasted a full minute. Then she lowered the pistol and stepped aside. That was the moment I knew. Not all of us were gone. Not all the loyalty was dead. We entered the vault. Rows upon rows of cryo-sealed black data boxes, humming with ancient whispers. Each one marked with a code, a planet, a name. We cracked open the first 5, downloaded everything. The raid on Cinderline that never happened? It happened, with Pact soldiers dressed as pirates. The destruction of old Varix medical stations? Fabricated. We bombed them to steal genetic code. The files were bombs. But the last box? That one nearly broke me. Nova Tre. I had always believed we were abandoned because of a tactical failure, panic, self-preservation. But the file told another story. The Pact, or what would become the Pact, had cut a deal. Pull out of Nova 3 in exchange for a full Zilari strategic database. It wasn't a betrayal in chaos. It was a transaction. My family didn't die because of war. They died because Earth wanted leverage. I dropped the box. My hands were shaking. Corin picked it up and said nothing. He didn't have to. We knew what had to happen next. We transmitted the files. Not through Black Net, not through pirate channels. We hijacked the central broadcast line, the one used by Revik himself to address the galaxy during the official Day of the Pact. Millions were watching. We gave them a show. We played the recordings, showed the logs, exposed the internal orders, and when it was all done, I appeared on the screen myself, face worn, eyes unblinking. I said 4 words. We remember the silence. And then we cut the feed. Earth erupted. Not in fire, in truth. The people didn't riot. They questioned. They doubted. And for the first time since the Reckoning Protocol, someone whispered that maybe the black flag had been drenched in too much red. Revik responded immediately, declared martial law, declared me and my crew enemies of unity. He tried to shut the flood. But it was too late. Truth doesn't vanish. It rots in silence, and when you finally crack the shell, it spreads. We vanished again. Not into defeat, into strategy. Because now the galaxy didn't just fear Earth. It distrusted it. And from that crack, we would burn it clean. The day after we leaked the Ashhold files, the stars changed. Not physically. The sky still glittered with silent beauty. But the way people looked up at them, that changed. For the first time in years, Earth wasn't the unshakable center of power. We weren't the vengeful gods who had risen from betrayal and bathed the galaxy in justified fire. We were liars, opportunists, monsters with broken hearts. That hurt more than I expected. Because even after everything, I still wanted to believe that what we did had meant something. That the pain, the violence, the vengeance, it had a place. That it wasn't just rage wrapped in a flag. Now it all looked like theater. Even the survivors, Even those who bled with us started asking questions. What really happened on Nova 3? Why did the Pact kill its own to secure power? What else had we lied about? The Pact didn't sit quietly. It roared back with every tool it had. Revek appeared on every holoscreen across controlled space, calm and calculated as ever, his face sharpened by artificial enhancement and pre-scripted sincerity. The recent attack on Earth's core data systems, he began, was not an act of truth. It was an act of terrorism. He called us traitors, claimed the data was fabricated, claimed I was mentally unstable, a soldier whose grief had become delusion. He wasn't trying to convince everyone, just enough. And for a time, it worked. Some colonies fell back in line. Smaller systems cut ties with us. Even a few old allies started locking their ports, afraid of being caught in what the media now called the Second Divide. But he made one mistake. He underestimated how far we'd already reached. The Cinder Circle wasn't just my crew anymore. It had spread, quietly, patiently, through field units, medical teams, communications officers, even within the council ranks. We'd been planting roots for years, long before Ashhold. Revek hadn't noticed, because he didn't believe we had the patience to build. He only knew how to burn. So while he screamed on screens, we acted in shadows. We sabotaged communications relays across the core belt, turned his carefully managed propaganda feeds into static. We rerouted transport fleets and turned supply lines into ghost routes. We even hijacked an entire shipyard's AI and forced it to produce zero-weapon humanitarian cruisers. No more warships for at least 2 cycles. Then came the coup attempt. Not by us, by his own. Someone tipped him off. The hub went dark. Merrick was captured. And then came the message that nearly broke me. They executed him on live broadcast. Not cleanly, not quickly. They made it slow. To send a message. Revek was done playing hero. Now he was letting the world see exactly who he had always been. Corin and I watched the execution from an abandoned observatory on the edge of Europa's mining district. We said nothing. Afterwards, Corin looked at me, jaw tight. "You ready to kill him yet?" he asked. "I was ready 10 years ago," I said. But it wasn't that simple. Revek didn't travel without 100 guards, all of them brain-chipped and loyalty-locked. His ships were black-coded, his fortress embedded in a crater with anti-personnel shielding. And killing him wouldn't be enough. We needed something bigger. We needed a symbol, something that would show every world watching that the Black Flag Pact was not invincible. That Earth had bled itself dry, chasing vengeance. That humanity still had a soul buried beneath the armor and flame. So we planned something no one would expect. A trial, not a bombing, not a raid. A public, formal trial. We'd capture Revek alive and drag him into the light. And we wouldn't kill him. We'd prove him guilty. Let the galaxy watch him crumble under the weight of the lies he built. It was insane. Every military strategist called it suicide. Every ally thought it was a trap. But we weren't doing this to win a war anymore. We were doing this to end one. We launched the mission on cycle 1203. The Cinder Circle infiltrated Revek's convoy en route to a Unity Summit on the reclaimed world of Denvir 5. Only this summit didn't exist. It was a security stunt, a quiet meeting of loyalist governors and military heads where they could restructure after the backlash. We replaced the escort ships with our own. We hacked the atmosphere seals on his private vessel. And we lured him into stepping onto a secure bridge that led directly into our containment rig. It worked. Too well. We had Revek bound, sedated, and transported to a hidden station above the old mining ring near Saturn. We broadcast the announcement galaxy-wide. Revek will stand trial for crimes against humanity, against the galaxy, against truth. That shook the stars. Some systems called it justice. Some called it blasphemy. But no one could look away. The trial is still a blur in my memory. I sat on the tribunal beside 2 Varix judges and 1 ex-Pact official who had defected during the leak. The crowd was digital, hundreds of millions watching from all corners of charted space. We played the files again. We confronted Revik with his own voice, his own orders. He never denied them. He didn't need to. He smiled the whole time. "You think killing me changes anything?" he said on the second day. "You think dragging me in front of a camera redeems the things you've done?" "I don't want redemption," I said. "I want the next generation to know the difference between vengeance and justice." "You really think they'll care?" "Not now. Maybe not for years. But one day, someone's going to stand where I stood, and they'll have a choice. And maybe, just maybe, they won't choose fire." That silenced him. On the 4th day, we passed judgment. Revik was guilty on every count. We didn't execute him. We exiled him to an old Varix penal world, unshielded, isolated, crawling with the same people he once condemned. We left him there without guards, without comfort, just his name and a memory. That was more punishment than death ever could be. And Earth began to breathe again. The black flag still flies, but not as a mark of rage. Now it's a warning, not just to others, but to ourselves. To remember where we came from, what we became, and how close we came to losing everything that made us human. The trial ended, but nothing felt finished. Revik was gone, swallowed by the world he helped poison. The files had been exposed, and the mask of the Pact had been stripped clean. But what lay beneath wasn't a revolution. It was rot. Systems that once pledged allegiance to Earth went silent. Some disconnected entirely. Others fractured internally. Warlords claiming territory, old governments clawing back power, colonies scrambling to build defenses of their own. We hadn't just toppled a regime. We'd cracked the foundation of an empire, and now every piece was falling where it pleased. I didn't blame them. For decades, Earth had positioned itself as the galactic enforcer, the wounded titan who rose from betrayal with righteous fury. Everyone bent the knee, not because they loved us, but because they feared we'd do to them what we did to the Zalari. Now that fear was gone, and in its place, chaos. The Cinder Circle spent weeks in orbit above the Saturn station, debating what came next. Some wanted to disappear. Let history do what it always does, forget. Others wanted to seize the moment, build a new order, something purer than the Pact. But we were soldiers, not architects. I spent most of those days staring out the observation deck at the curve of Saturn's rings, thinking. Not about politics, about my kids, about Nova 3, about how I spent half my life chasing fire and fury, only to reach the summit and find nothing but ash. Corin joined me one evening, holding 2 battered tin mugs of synth coffee. He dropped one beside me without saying a word and leaned against the bulkhead. "You see what they're saying on the feeds?" he asked. I didn't look. "Depends who they is." "Zalari government in exile offered amnesty," he said. "They're asking for a meeting." I laughed, dry and bitter. "Didn't they broadcast my execution orders just 4 cycles ago?" "Yeah," he said. "But the galaxy's got a short memory when it comes to power shifts." I sipped the coffee. "I don't want diplomacy." "You're gonna get it," he replied. "People are scared. You tore down the devil, but you didn't give him a god." That line stuck with me. We'd spent so long destroying, we never considered what should come next. Maybe we were too angry, too broken. Maybe we thought the absence of tyranny would naturally birth freedom. But freedom isn't born. It's built, and we hadn't built anything. Not yet. So I met with the Zalari, not in a chamber or on a platform, but in the rubble of Ashhold, the place where their betrayal was buried, and where the truth had risen from. Their delegation was small, 3 ex-ministers, none of them in uniform, none of them smiling. They didn't offer apologies. They offered options. "We want to stabilize the sector," one of them said. "The war left every trade lane vulnerable. The Ulmor are arming again. The Variks are still holding the outer rim." I didn't reply. Another added, "You have influence. Respect, if not admiration. We need to rebuild, Commander Vorn." I shook my head. "I'm not a commander anymore." She tilted her head. "Then what are you?" And I told her the truth. "I'm the man who made the galaxy fear Earth again. And I'm the one who's going to teach them why they should have feared silence more." They didn't understand that, but I didn't expect them to. What I did expect, and what I demanded, was full restoration for every colony left to die. Reparations, names of everyone involved in the Nova 3 betrayal, amnesty for survivors wrongly labeled insurgents, a full release of all internal logs from every nation involved in the first betrayal war. They agreed. Not because they wanted to, because they had no choice. We were no longer allies or enemies. We were a mirror. And they were tired of seeing their own face covered in blood. From there, we moved fast. The pact was formally dissolved within 3 cycles. Earth's military was decentralized. Every ship, every AI system, every Black Flag division disbanded or repurposed under a new council of systems, human and non-human both. The Variks held 2 seats. The Risari took 1. And Earth took 1. Just 1. It felt right. We weren't there to dominate anymore. We were there to remember. I never expected peace to feel this strange. After years of fire, stillness felt unnatural. I woke up without alarms, walked corridors that didn't hum with war engines. I saw children again, not crying in shelters but laughing in real air, chasing hoverballs in gravity fields rebuilt from old war zones. The galaxy was healing, but healing doesn't mean forgetting. One night, I stood on the edge of the Nova 3 Memorial, overlooking the rebuilt colony zone. It wasn't a city yet, just a small outpost, a garden, a wall of names. My wife's name was there. So were my children's, etched into steel, untouched by time. Corin stood beside me. We didn't speak. There was nothing left to say. Just silence, the kind we'd always feared. But this time, this silence didn't feel like betrayal. It felt like rest. We'd taken everything they had, not just their systems, their power, their pride. We'd taken back our story, our truth. And now, finally, we could begin writing a new one. One not born in blood, but carved in memory. It's strange how peace feels like a question more than an answer. For years, all we wanted was justice. We fought, burned, bled for it. We made the stars remember our pain, made the traitors tremble when they saw the black mark of Earth on their charts. But now that the fighting was over, I realized something I never let myself admit during the war. I didn't know how to live without enemies. I walked through New Earth Settlement 9, one of the newest cities, built on the bones of a former packed fortress, now transformed into a hub of diplomacy and trade. Children were everywhere, not just human. Variks hatchlings, Risari lightborn, even a few Ulmor splicelings. A generation raised without guilt, without fear. They didn't know betrayal. Didn't know what it meant to watch your world burn while your so-called allies turned their backs. And they never would. That was the point. He asked me to help once. Said the kids needed stories from the field. I told him no. Not because I didn't want to teach them, but because I didn't want them learning my way. I wasn't proud of everything we did. I told myself it was necessary, and maybe it was. But necessity doesn't mean clean. We drowned the galaxy in vengeance. And when the tide pulled back, we saw everything that had been left beneath the surface. The mistakes, the lines crossed, the lives broken in pursuit of something that could never truly be repaid. The Black Flag was never about politics. It wasn't about governance. It was grief, weaponized and unleashed. And now, grief had nowhere left to go. So I stayed on Nova 3. Rebuilding wasn't my skill, but memory was. The council offered me a seat, some ceremonial title. I refused it. I didn't want power anymore. I didn't want to shape the future. I just wanted to guard the past. I started writing, not speeches, not history books, letters, to the dead. Every night I'd sit on the edge of the rebuilt terrace and write 1 page at a time. To my wife, my kids, to the soldiers we lost, to Dren, to Merrick, to the ones who went missing and the ones who never came home even when they lived. I kept the pages sealed, never read them twice, just stacked them in a box. Maybe someday someone will find them and read the truth, not from reports, but from the heart of a man who stood in fire and somehow came out the other side without burning to dust. One night I got a message from Lynn Eneris. I hadn't spoken to her since the trial. After she let me into Ashhold, she disappeared, exiled herself to one of the remote outer moons, said she wanted silence. She sent only 3 lines. "They're naming the Unity Plaza after you. You should come." I didn't answer, but I went. The ceremony was quiet, no fanfare, just a gathering of the new council and a crowd of people from 100 different species. I stood in the back, no uniform, no speech. And when they unveiled the statue, a crude metal silhouette of a man holding a torn flag, I didn't see myself. I saw all of us, the broken, the betrayed, the ones who chose to rise instead of kneel. After the event, Lynn found me on the outskirts, under the glow of twin moons. "You did it," she said. I shook my head. We did it, and not all of it right. She didn't argue. "There's a weight that comes with being the one who remembers," she said. "Most of them won't understand what was lost to build this." "I don't want them to," I replied. She nodded. "So what now?" I looked at the plaza, at the kids playing near the monument, at the diplomats shaking hands, at the broken galaxy learning how to rebuild 1 crack at a time. "Now," I said, "now we make damn sure it doesn't happen again." And that was it. That was the end of our war, not with a bang, but with memory. The stars are quieter these days. The transmissions are full of trade deals and colony births, not death reports. The warships sit in dry dock, rusting into relics. People wear flags again, not of domination, but of identity, of pride. And Earth is no longer feared. It's respected. Maybe that's what we should have wanted from the start. I still wake up some nights with the screams in my ears. I still feel the heat of Nova 3. I still see Ravek's smirk in the dark corners of my mind. Some wounds don't close. But they don't bleed anymore. We didn't get revenge. We got reckoning. And in the ashes of all they took from us, we found something no enemy could ever steal again. Ourselves. We are Earth. We remember. And now, finally, we live. They buried me quietly. Not in a casket, not in the ground. I wasn't dead, not officially, but the world had moved on, and I was no longer part of it. The galaxy didn't need men like me anymore, and maybe that was the greatest victory we ever earned. I live now on the outer edge of a terraformed planet once called Greylight 3. It's peaceful here. 2 suns, light wind, small community, no politics, no war councils, just soil, silence, and a sky that forgives you for looking up. They gave me land, not as a reward, but as a courtesy. No fanfare, just a transport pod with coordinates and a simple message from the council. For service rendered. I didn't ask for more. Didn't want more. Some days I plant, other days I walk. Sometimes I just sit on the porch with a worn-out old pistol on the table beside me. Not because I expect trouble, but because part of me doesn't know how to feel safe without steel nearby. Old habits don't die. They sleep. Corin visits once in a while, still carrying that same jagged laugh. He's part of a veterans group now, helping others find peace. He told me the Variks are offering amnesty programs. A few Zolari colonies are even naming schools after human commanders. Funny, isn't it? The same name they feared for years is now being scribbled by children on the walls of education halls. We talk less about the war these days. Not because we've forgotten. Because we've said all there is to say. I keep the box of letters beside my bed. It's grown heavier over time. Hundreds of pages now. I've never opened it. I don't need to. The memories are branded into me. My daughter's laugh, my wife's hands, my son's questions. Their absence is louder than any battle cry ever was. But that pain, it's no longer a blade. It's a scar, and scars don't ache the same way. They remind you that you lived. Sometimes I get messages from historians, young researchers digging through Black Flag records, trying to make sense of what we were, what we became. Most want permission to quote me. I tell them no, because you can't quote fire. You can only survive it. Still, one message came through from a young girl named Kima. 13, studying galactic history on a Variks-led settlement. She found my name in a file, said her teacher called me a complex symbol. She asked a single question. Were you ever afraid? I didn't answer right away. Took me weeks. But eventually, I wrote back. I told her the truth. Every day, every damn day, afraid we'd fail. Afraid we'd go too far. Afraid that when the dust finally settled, we'd look in the mirror and see the enemy staring back. But we never stopped. Because sometimes fear isn't a wall, it's a compass. If you're not afraid of what you're becoming, you're already too far gone. I told her to stay afraid, but never paralyzed. To remember that silence is more dangerous than conflict. That peace without truth is just waiting for betrayal to grow legs, she wrote back. Said she wanted to become a diplomat. Not to make people love each other, but to make sure no one ever forgets what happens when they stop listening. Smart girl, the world's in good hands. As for me, I'm not a hero, never was. I'm just a man who lost everything and refused to stay quiet. A man who carried a flame long enough to make others remember the fire. One day, long after I'm gone, someone will stand on the same soil we fought for, and they'll read about us in a book. Maybe they'll shake their head. Maybe they'll cry. Maybe they'll wonder how we ever let things get so far. And maybe they'll whisper a promise that it won't happen again, and maybe, just maybe, they'll keep it.